Hi, I'm Michael Twelftree, the owner at Two Hands Wines, and I'm really excited to introduce the 2018 Garden Series wines. 18 is a really strong vintage. We feel that it's right up there with some of the better wines that we've made in our career. 18 was frustrating from a viticultural point of view in that we had two really hot heat events post-veraison. So once the grapes had coloured up, and we had to help the vineyards out with some supplementary water to keep the leaves on the vines. And then we went in this kind of doldrums for 2 or 3 weeks where the grapes didn't really show a lot of ripeness and they didn't flavour ripen. And we really had to play a big game of cat and mouse. We couldn't jump in too early because the flavours simply weren't there. And I do like vintages where the grapes do ripen slowly, but this was kind of getting to a point of ridiculousness where the vineyards were quite stagnant in their ripening profile. But I'm really glad that we hung on, we hung on and we hung on, and then boom, the flavours came and the wines have turned out to be really quite remarkable. As always with our Garden Series wines that we've been making for a very long time, I always believe it's best to start with the more elegant red fruit wines, moving to the purple and then darker fruit wines. I think the wines taste a lot better that way. So we're going to start off with our Harriet's Garden, which is from 2 vineyards in the Adelaide Hills. It's from Brackenwood Estate, which is at Hope Forest, which is the coldest vineyard that we work with. The fruit never gets above kind of 13% potential alcohol. We use a lot of whole bunch in this wine. The other vineyard is Samanthas vineyard, which is at Woodside. We blend the two components together. I really love the blend of the two because both vineyards add quite a different component. There's a real greenness and earthiness and lifted bouquet to this wine. The thing I love the most about Harriet's Garden is it's a wine that I wouldn't have been brave enough to make when we started 20 years ago. It's a wine that evolved, and I started making small batches from this vineyard under the Twelftree label, and that kind of went mainstream when we decided they were good enough to move on to a Garden Series wines. As I say, we believe cooler the climate, the more the whole bunch. So we vary between 60 and 80% whole bunch on this wine, all in older French oak, and the fruit profile really is that kind of very lifted aromatic profile. There's always some tobacco and green earthy elements, which I really love in this wine, but I never see the tannins being green or astringent. They're always ripe tannins, which I really like. So to me, this is a wine that I think was really outside the box for Two Hands, but something that I think really adds a lot to the portfolio. Next up in the lineup is Max's Garden, a wine that we've made every year since 2003. It's funny that this vineyard's about 800 kilometres from our winery here in the Barossa, and I always love it because John and Jenny Davies own the vineyard. Colin Neat, the viticulturalist, has been with us the whole journey. We take the same parcel every year. And what I love about it is that they're just so easy to deal with. You would have thought that having a vineyard so far away, I fly over there 3 or 4 times throughout the year to make the picking decision. And I'm always drawn to Heathcote because it's un-South Australian. And what I really say about that is that the wine's a very tannin and acid profile. There's not any cascading glycerol or sweet fruit, or there's a real, I find the wine's kind of really interesting for the fact that I think that the tannins are really quite driven in this wine. I really love it after some age. On release, I get pleasure from it, but after 5 years in the cellar, that's when I think Heathcote really does show its grace and elegance. You're talking about Cumbrian soil here, that's this orange, bright clay that's very deep. It's thought to be some of the oldest soil in the world. We've got some really well-heeled neighbours in this vineyard that make some of the best wines from Heathcote, and I'm just really drawn to this site and the style that we make from it year in and year out. The next one in the Garden Series is the Samanthas Garden from Clare Valley. I have a real soft spot for Clare Valley wines. I really love the flicker between the red and purple fruit and then the real velvety tannins. I find the caressing nature of this wine really interesting, and it's a favourite of mine year in and year out. The vineyard sources here are 2 vineyard sources. One is Chiringa Vineyard, owned by the Kairos family, and the other vineyard is Richard Hughes's out at White Hut. So we take 2 really great parcels, one south facing, one east facing. Clare ripens really slowly, and it's a real balancing act to make sure that you get the fruit purity without getting any over ripeness in the wines, to keep that real energy in the wine. Once again, I think it's a wine that ages particularly well. We only use a small amount of new oak, about 7 or 8%. Most of it's older French oak, which I prefer for most of our wines here at Two Hands. And once again, we've been opening up 04s, 05s, 02s of this wine lately, and the wines are just in a brilliant place. So once again, a very strong vintage for Samanthas Garden. Next up, I really want to show the contrast between really Eden Valley and Barossa Valley, and that I just love both of these regions. And here we are dealing with Western Ranges fruit with the McLaren Garden, which is 230 to 240 metres in elevation, annual rainfall 450 odd mil. And then we pop up 15 minutes up the road, we go double the altitude to Joel Matchos's vineyard, which is 498 metres above sea level. It's a vineyard that we planted together about 7 or 8 years ago called Post Block that goes into this. We did clonal selection and row orientation, a lot of work in the vineyard, and it's great to see us being rewarded down the track for such a great wine. But really, double the altitude, double the rainfall, and completely different soil profile. What I love about Eden is you have two soil profiles on top of each other. You have buckshot and you have quartz, and then you have this real grey marl across the top of it. And then when you come over to the Western Ranges, where all our vineyards for McLaren Garden come from, you're talking about granitic red brown earth with a lot of quartz in the soil. So it's kind of, they're really, I love serving things next to each other because I think they really do show that Australia has terroir, and that really we can have vineyards that are different altitudes and different sites and different soil profiles, growing similarly. Eden ripens slower, there's always more minerality there, but I really think this is a great story about Australian wines. This is a great vintage of our 18 McLaren Garden, mostly the wine here at Two Hands we're most famous for. What I really love here is that great Barossa nature. There's something that really draws you to Barossa, in that the wines have this lovely, really dark purple to black fruit, but then the tannins are so soft. And I think that's the magic act of Barossa. All the fruit for this wine comes from predominantly our own vineyard, Holy Grail, and then all of our growers that have been with us a very long time from different hamlets across the Western Ranges. So we take fruit from Gomersal, then very closely to the Marananga winery just over the hill in Stonewell, and then we go across to Marananga, up to Seppeltsfield, Greenock, Mopper, Ebenezer, and a little bit of Kalimna as well. It's a vintage where I just think follows you around the room. To me, taste the wine, and what I love about it is the tannins are so supple and they just sit in the late palate, and then there's just this beautiful mouthfeel and texture. So yeah, look, 18, they really are special wines, but I really think the Bellas is looking particularly good today. Last wine is Lily's Garden, McLaren Vale, which we've made since 2000, and McLaren Vale is a really fascinating place. This wine, I think, is starting to show more restraint, and what we've done in the last 5 years is we've moved our fruit sourcing. We've moved out of the McLaren Vale floor, much more up into the hills, Blewett Springs, which is a fascinating place, 160 to 180 metres above sea level, ripens much slower. It's kind of this sand, beach sand over orange clay. And then in the last 3 years, we've pushed up into Clarendon, which is 250 to 260 metres above sea level, and has kind of a soil profile that's more inclined with Eden Valley. So what I'm seeing by our fruit sourcing changing is that 50% is now the floor, 30% now is Blewett, and 20% now is Clarendon. And what that's really done to the wine is it's really given a lot of polish to the late palate. To me, a lot of McLaren Vale can be quite boisterous, and I struggle with the sweetness in a lot of McLaren Vale wines. What I love here is we get the tension and the restraint, and you get this late plush minerality, and I think that's really special. I think it's not easy to do in McLaren Vale, and I think this vintage is really starting to show the direction that we're heading with this wine.